The noisy airport was filled with the chatter of children gathered for a festival in Sochi. Among them, like an island of calm in a stormy sea, stood their theater club leader, Tanya Viktorovna. Accompanying the group for formal reasons was the school's deputy principal, Maria Genrikovna. Tanya wasn't exactly thrilled about this administrative supervision, but outwardly remained composed while the children bustled and made noise. A problem arose. One of the girls had a discrepancy in her documents. Maria Genrikovna, usually so organized, was at a loss, and Tanya's seemingly carefree demeanor only irritated her further. Yet it was Tanya who unexpectedly found a solution by printing out the electronic ticket, instantly resolving the issue. In the waiting area, the children finally settled down. Tanya sat a bit apart, while Maria Genrikovna, keeping her distance, took a seat opposite her. Tanya stood up and, turning to the deputy principal with a hint of playful sarcasm in her voice, asked to have two of her students roomed together. Maria Genrikovna, as if personally offended, curtly requested that Tanya Viktorovna not disturb her until the flight's arrival. At the modest Sochi hotel, the tired children nearly fell asleep right in the lobby while the teachers waited for the paperwork to be completed. Showing persistence, they finally secured the room keys and settled into their accommodations. The morning greeted Tanya with the sound of the surf. She sat on a lounge chair, admiring the Sochi sea and sipping a cup of coffee she had managed to find somewhere. Her gaze drifted toward the pier and lingered on the solitary figure of Maria Genrikovna, slowly walking along the wooden planks. Without hesitation, Tanya headed in her direction. When they drew level, they began to talk. With a faint smile, Tanya promised that next time she would bring coffee for the deputy principal as well, black, no sugar, no milk, and very strong, perfectly guessing her taste. Her tone carried a playful, teasing note, as if she were gently mocking Maria Genrikovna's excessive strictness, the kind that made one instinctively want to stand at attention. Between them began a subtle, almost weightless game where each tried to test the boundaries of the other and learn a little more. Maria Genrikovna looked at Tanya Viktorovna appraisingly, but now without her former irritation. There was a warm spark of understanding in her eyes as she realized that behind the clown's mask hid an exceptional person. In the assembly hall where performances were taking place, they sat side by side. Tanya, dying of boredom from yet another number, whispered to the deputy principal suggesting they sneak away, but though Maria wanted to, she restrained herself, maintaining her mask of seriousness. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by one of the students, Anya. The girl complained that she urgently needed to step outside. Tanya, seizing the long-awaited chance, immediately stood up and, with a mischievous glint in her eye, remarked to Maria Genrikovna that now she simply had to follow Anya to keep an eye on her. While the performance continued on stage, Tanya and Anya strolled through the streets, eating ice cream and carefreely swinging on swings. When the show ended and the children came out with the deputy principal, Maria Genrikovna immediately began looking around for Tanya. Not seeing her, she dialed her number. The melody of the ringtone matched the rhythm of the music to which Anya had started dancing. Tanya, caught up in the girl's cheerful mood, joined in, and soon the two of them were laughing and dancing under the open sky. From afar, Maria Genrikovna noticed them and, realizing that the melody playing was her own ringtone, couldn't help but smile. In that moment, she no longer saw Tanya as just a colleague, but as a vivid, open, and irresistibly captivating person who was beginning to take up more and more space in her heart. Despite her outward sharpness and teasing remarks, Tanya was surprised to realize her growing affection for Maria Genrikovna. Her gaze lingered on the deputy principal more and more often, noticing every detail with genuine admiration. Maria Genrikovna, in turn, tried to maintain her usual cold composure, carefully hiding the sympathy awakening within her. In the cafeteria, one of the festival organizers approached them and asked Tanya to come by later to discuss an important matter. That conversation turned into a real drama for her. It turned out that the title of her play, Strawberry Wine, was, in the jury's opinion, promoting alcohol and therefore unsuitable for a children's event. The poster featuring a bottle also had to be replaced immediately, Passionately defending her creation, Tanya tried to prove that it was a piece of classic literature with no inappropriate undertones, but the organizer remained adamant, insisting on a compromise. At the subsequent meeting, Tanya looked both angry and dejected. Outraged, she complained to Maria Genrikovna that with such an approach, they'd have to rename half of the world's classics. The deputy principal quietly laughed, trying not to draw attention, and in her laughter there was a hint of understanding and solidarity with Tanya's frustration. Seeing how upset she was, Maria Genrikovna gently invited Tanya to join her for dinner at a restaurant, hoping to distract her from the heavy thoughts. But Tanya declined, saying she needed to rehearse urgently. That evening, while Maria Genrikovna waited for a taxi, preparations for the play were in full swing in the hotel lobby. Tanya was trying to persuade the staff to turn off the lights for one of the scenes, but her efforts were in vain. Watching from afar and seeing Tanya's helplessness in such mundane matters, Maria Genrikovna decided to step in. With ease, she negotiated with the administrator, got what she wanted, and the lights went out. Having solved the issue, she quietly stepped away, leaving Tanya to create her art. The next morning once again greeted them with the sound of waves. Sitting on lounge chairs, they drank coffee. Tanya's gaze repeatedly turned toward Maria Genrikovna, as if she were searching for the right words to say something important. The latter, however, pretended to be entirely absorbed in watching the sea. Breaking the long silence, Tanya suddenly asked if the coffee was good. Without looking at her, Maria Genrikovna replied that it was excellent, but asked her not to stare so intently. Tanya jumped up, muttering that switching to you instead of the formal you was proof enough of the coffee's exceptional quality, and began tossing pebbles into the water. At that moment, her phone rang. It was her husband. Maria Genrikovna reminded Tanya about the call, but she didn't want to answer. In the conversation that followed, the deputy principal cautiously hinted at rumors among the children that Tanya's husband had left her. Instead of getting upset, Tanya, as if opening her soul, admitted that in their relationship there had never been an apogee, that state when being with someone simply feels right, when that person makes you smile. Maria Genrikovna listened closely, catching every breath, and it seemed to her that she understood the subtle implication, yet she continued to restrain herself, not allowing her feelings to break free. The new meeting with the festival organizer brought nothing but disappointment. He had replaced the poster on his own, insisting that the new one was perfect. Tanya was devastated. Seeing her state, Maria Genrikovna tried to stand up for her, suggesting that they restore the original version, but the organizer coldly replied that rejecting the new poster would mean the play's removal from the competition. The next rehearsal was overshadowed not only by external problems, but also by internal conflict among the young actors. Anya, who played the lead role, was in love with her partner Sasha, but her feelings weren't mutual. Tanya tried to put out this emotional fire, while Maria Genrikovna watched from the sidelines, admiring her pedagogical intuition. After rehearsal, they walked together along the embankment. Maria Genrikovna had already ordered oysters and champagne over the phone. Suddenly, without stopping, she asked how much longer Tanya was going to keep addressing her formally as you. Without slowing her pace, Tanya smiled, a smile laced with irony and a hint of challenge, and replied that soon Maria Genrikovna wouldn't be able to stop her at all, but for now there still remained a certain barrier between them. Their attention was caught by a noisy wedding. Maria Genrikovna immediately recognized the Armenian traditions. Her husband was Armenian. Tanya seized the opportunity and persuaded her to take a look inside. Inside, there was pure joy. Music thundered, guests congratulated the newlyweds. Finding the drinks table, they both allowed themselves to relax. Soon they quietly settled at one of the tables. Maria, familiar with the customs, easily found common ground with a nearby Armenian guest. Tanya simply sat, smiling and sipping from her glass, watching the deputy principal. Having attended such weddings before with her husband, Maria joined the dancing. She laughed and mingled, men spinning around her. Watching this, Tanya suddenly felt a sharp sting of jealousy and loneliness. Wanting to draw attention, she climbed over the railing and jumped into the water. Maria and the men ran to the shore, but she calmed them down, saying Tanya was fine, she was just swimming. When they left, Tanya emerged from the water, and Maria looked at her with undisguised tenderness. With a touch of playful jealousy, she asked whether her admirers had already abandoned her. Then Tanya suddenly asked her to tell her biggest secret, and Maria, as if losing control, blurted out that all her teeth were artificial. The words slipped out on their own, as if she had truly longed to open up, but only to her. Tanya laughed instead of mocking and immediately demanded to see them. Maria first refused, embarrassed, but under Tanya's insistent, curious gaze, she hesitantly lifted her lips for a brief moment, showing a perfectly even row. Their walk back to the hotel was filled with a kind of light madness. Tanya, playing music on her phone, danced as she walked. Maria, following behind, suddenly demanded that Tanya take off her clothes. With a teasing smile, pretending not to understand the hint, Tanya quipped that such things should probably happen in a more suitable place, not on the street, but the deputy principal was insistent. Tanya began to untie the knot of her dress at the waist, struggling with it, and finally asked for help. Maria helped her, lifting the dress slightly, then draped her own jacket over Tanya's shoulders. Tanya, trying it on, joked playfully about how well it suited her. Then Maria stepped closer and, looking into her face, softly said that her mascara had smudged. She gently touched Tanya's face, wiping the traces of makeup from beneath her eyes. Suddenly, she took an awkward step forward, finding herself right in front of Maria. The deputy principal instinctively pressed her lips together. The air between them grew electric. It seemed that in another heartbeat, their lips would meet. But Maria stepped back, muttering that Tanya had stumbled, picked up a bottle, and walked away. Tanya followed, realizing that something between them had changed forever. The door closed behind them, the only boundary between them and the rest of the world. Tanya, barely crossing the threshold, wrapped herself in a blanket and fell onto the bed, mumbling incoherent, half-sleepy words directed at Maria Genrikovna. Seeing that it was already 4 a.m, Maria softly said it was time to sleep. She took an extra blanket from the shelf and came closer to the bed, ending up right beside Tanya. Tanya sat up. Quietly and trustfully, she asked, "Will you remember my voice? The way we laughed?" Maria Genrikovna replied with a faint, barely perceptible smile. "I will." Then Tanya gently placed her palms on the deputy principal's face, covering her eyes, and whispered, "Do you know what color my eyes are?" Maria carefully moved her hands away and, looking directly at her, asked whether Tanya had an off button somewhere. In response, Tanya playfully lifted her head, pointing to her own neck. Maria exhaled almost soundlessly, "Turn it off yourself." After that, only silence and the secret that wrapped them until morning. Morning came. They had slept in the same bed, and the air was filled with a silent understanding of what had happened. The silence was broken by Anya, who entered the room to announce that everyone was looking for them. Maria Genrikovna jumped up abruptly, while Tanya only lazily opened her eyes. With tenderness and her usual teasing tone, Tanya reproached the deputy principal for not setting an alarm. In response, Maria Genrikovna looked at her and suddenly switched to the formal "you," her voice cold and official. That sudden distance pierced Tanya like a knife, leaving her hurt and disappointed. The deputy principal headed to the bathroom, but the door jammed. Tanya, teasing again, asked why she needed to lock it at all, and then, with feigned recollection, added, "Ah, yes, I forgot. You have that special procedure. Take it out, put it in." When Maria Genrikovna finally emerged, dressed and composed, she coldly announced that Tanya's theater club was being shut down. She said it with such detachment, as if she wanted to wound, as if nothing had ever happened between them, as if they were strangers once more. In the auditorium, the children gathered for the final rehearsal, and Maria Genrikovna was there as well. When Tanya entered the hall, it was as if the weight of everything crashed down on her at once, the deputy principal's coldness and the news of her theater club being shut down. She felt lost and utterly alone. Later, during the children's walk through the boxwood grove, Tanya and Maria Genrikovna walked apart, avoiding any conversation. Anya, who had refused to join the group, stayed behind with Tanya. Wanting to sting her, the girl asked mockingly what the parents would say if they found out that Tanya and Maria Genrikovna were sleeping together. Tanya retorted sharply that it was none of her business. Back at the hotel, Tanya was speaking in her room with the mother of one of the students. When Maria Genrikovna appeared at the door to announce lunch, she saw Tanya in a gray dress, laughing and animated. Their eyes met, and Tanya immediately fell silent. Maria's gaze slowly traveled up and down her, and she couldn't help but admit to herself how strikingly attractive Tatiana was. When the children rushed into the room with a note from Anya, Tanya immediately went to find her and discovered the girl by the ping-pong table. They played for a while, then sat side by side. Looking into the distance, Tanya gently explained to Anya that Sasha didn't love her, but added that true love looks truly beautiful. Anya nodded in understanding, as if guessing what was really happening between her teacher and the deputy principal. On the day of the performance, the children gave a brilliant show. The audience applauded, and even Maria Genrikovna couldn't hide her approval. However, at the jury's meeting, the play was deemed too mature and lacking in meaning, and it was stripped of any awards. Maria suggested buying certificates herself to cheer up the children, but Tanya insisted that they should know the truth. At the award ceremony, Tanya sat, disheartened, watching the winners on stage. Once outside, she could barely hold back tears. Maria Genrikovna tried to comfort her, placing a hand on her shoulder, but Tanya abruptly pulled away, saying she was fine. The deputy principal watched her with a heavy heart. Suddenly, a member of the jury approached them and invited the adults to a banquet and the children to a disco. The banquet hall buzzed with strangers' conversations and the hollow clinking of forced laughter. Tanya sat at the table, detached and absent, resting her head in her hands. Beside her, feeling every flicker of her tension, sat Maria Genrikovna. Seeing her pale, lost face, she quietly suggested leaving, going to a restaurant, finding another Armenian wedding, doing anything at all. But Tanya stayed silent, staring blankly ahead. Then Maria Genrikovna, almost in despair, asked what she could do for her. Tanya slowly shifted her gaze to the enormous untouched cake decorated with chocolate masks. "I want to eat that mask," she whispered. "Which one?" asked Maria Genrikovna. "The sad one or the happy one?" "Both," came the quiet reply. Without a moment's hesitation, Maria Genrikovna stood up and walked across the hall to the cake. With a gentle, apologetic smile to the jury members, she took 2 chocolate masks from the fairy tale-like creation. Under the puzzled stares of everyone present, she returned and placed both masks on Tanya's plate. "Both," she said. And Tanya suddenly smiled. In that absurd, daring gesture, she read everything: support, love, and the readiness to share in her every act of rebellion. They stepped out onto the dance floor, where the children immediately surrounded them, pulling them into the dance. But the joy didn't last long. One of the girls came running, saying that Anya was crying bitterly outside. Everyone, the children, Tanya, and Maria Genrikovna, rushed out. Tanya was the first to approach her. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Through her sobs, Anya admitted that the day would end, and it would never come again. Tanya hugged her, whispering lines from their play, and at that moment, all the children, as if on cue, gathered around them, forming a living, warm circle of embraces. A gray, overcast morning marked the day of departure. The children were loading their bags into the bus. Tanya stood facing Araik, Maria Genrikovna's husband, and smiled. Maria looked at Tanya, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes lit up with that familiar warmth. Suddenly, Tanya spoke up, her voice bright and clear, telling Araik how lucky he was to have such a wonderful wife. With genuine enthusiasm, she recalled how much fun she and Maria Genrikovna had together, saying that she didn't even want to let her go now. Araik smirked and replied that Tanya could simply take his wife for herself. Tanya perked up immediately, asking if he wouldn't regret it. He chuckled and asked whether she even knew how much it cost to maintain his wife. Tanya paused for a moment, then asked her most important question. Did he even know what color his wife's eyes were? Araik only smiled in response. Maria Genrikovna, standing beside him, softly said that Tanya was just joking. Araik offered to give Tanya a ride. Maria Genrikovna, without uttering a word, only averted her gaze slightly, but it was enough. Tanya understood. Their goodbye had to happen here and now. Catching that silent verdict, she managed to force out that she would go with the children. As she said goodbye, Tanya shook Araik's hand and then turned to Maria Genrikovna. Not a handshake, not a polite nod, but a gentle, trembling kiss on the cheek. The world froze. Maria Genrikovna stood still, absorbing that touch, a touch that was both a confession and a farewell. Then, without a word, she turned and walked toward the car. She didn't look back. She couldn't allow herself to. But Tanya did. She watched them until they disappeared from view, and only then, hollow inside, climbed onto the bus. The car sped off as if trying to escape itself. Loud music filled the cabin, but it couldn't drown out the silence that settled inside Maria Genrikovna's heart. Her hands clenched the steering wheel, and her eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Taking a slow, steady breath, she forced herself to stay composed, the only thing left for her now. Tanya sat down on the bus, put on her headphones, and stared out the window. She couldn't hear the music, only the heavy silence pressing inside her chest. She knew it was the end, the fragile thread that had bound them over those few days that had felt like an entire lifetime, had finally broken. In the car, Maria Genrikovna watched the road rushing away beneath the wheels, feeling life slip back into its familiar routine. Each passing kilometer brought almost physical pain. She knew it was forever. All that remained now were memories and the faint, ghostly trace of that last kiss on the cheek.